Hello, welcome to Friday's ESPN FC Live. It's Donaldson, it's Nicol, and it's Dawson. Happy New Year to you all. Stevie Nicol, what's your New Year's resolution?
Same as always, lose some weight.
How's that going?
I'm going to start when we finish today.
Me too. Rob Dawson, what's yours?
It was meant to be more exercise, but I'm probably going to wait till the start of 2025, I think.
Yeah, it's overrated. We've all got gym memberships, which we're going to lose at the start of February. Anyway, it's FA Cup weekend. We're going to look ahead to potential giant killers and have a look at some of the bigger boys and see if they're going to name a full-strength lineup against some of the minnows in the FA Cup this weekend. 3rd of June, Manchester City beating Manchester United by 2-1 to win the 2023 FA Cup. Stevie Nicol, I hate people who just gratuitously plug their products or their book, but your book title is 5 league titles and a packet of crisps. That's only because you and I couldn't fit 3 FA Cups in there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Memories of the FA Cup? What about the tunnel prior to the game against Wimbledon, or what about the comfortable win against Sunderland? What stands out for you in your time as a Liverpool player in the FA Cup?
I mean, it's hard to listen. Obviously, when you lift the FA Cup, some would say it doesn't get any better than that. But of course, for us, winning the FA Cup, it was a bit of a relief because we always expected to win it, particularly when we were in the final. So the real memory is when you walk down the tunnel before the game, as you're going towards the entrance or the exit of the tunnel with the lights shining through. Because the beauty of the old Wembley was you couldn't see from the tunnel what was going on outside it because of the sun, and so when you walked out and you got to the end of the tunnel, there was just this noise, this cacophony, just cheering and singing, and just a huge wall of noise. And I can still hear it now. And every time I think about it, I get the old shivers. So yeah, that obviously winning it's great, lifting the cup, but that initial walking out onto Wembley right before the game, yeah, unforgettable.
One of my favourite stories was some idiot deciding that, we'll let Liverpool and Everton players fly back and get open-top buses together, not even thinking that one might win and one might lose.
Yeah, as you said, some clever person in Liverpool City Council decided that Everton and Liverpool, it would be great for the city if both teams travelled back together, if both teams went round the city together. And as you said, the only problem was that not only did we win the FA Cup, but the week prior to it, we won the league title as well. So there's one bus going through Liverpool right up the front, a big red bus with all kinds of shiny silverware. And there's a blue bus behind that's, just a bus. It was rather embarrassing for the Evertonians.
Rob, does it get any better for you as the kind of Northwest correspondent covering both Manchester teams to have an FA Cup final involving both Manchester teams last June?
No. Obviously a fantastic occasion, made even more special because City were trying to win the treble. Obviously United had the chance to stop them and preserve their own treble that they won in 1999. Obviously disappointing on the day for Man United, but a fantastic day out for City fans. And Pep Guardiola, even today in his press conference, was saying how special it was. He even said that he'd been stopped in the street by a couple of City fans relatively recently who said that out of all the 3 trophies that they won last season, the Premier League, the FA Cup and the Champions League, because that final was against Man United, because they'd beaten their fiercest rivals in an FA Cup final, that was the one that they would remember the most. And that just shows you, even in the context of a historical achievement that City managed to do, it was the FA Cup that stands out for some City fans.
Plenty of games to talk about before we get Rob and Stevie's thoughts about some of the fixtures. We're going to start with Burnley. Now, their co-owner, JJ Watt, has been on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN, looking ahead to their game against Spurs and also telling an American audience what the FA Cup really does mean.
But we need to talk about this Burnley team. Where are we?
Yeah,
because
we got
Gumpy told
big
me.
FA Cup match Friday.
Does that count? Ooh. Does FA Cup count, Matt? That counts?
Yeah, I mean, it's against Spurs. It's going to be
like the NBA
Cup. A good match. Yeah. It's going to be a tough match. Yeah, it's like the It's the NBA has started to. Mark Cuban is very big on European football, and he was very big on trying to implement some of the things from the academy to some of the in-season tournaments. And the FA Cup is somewhat roughly what they modeled that in-season tournament after.
Okay, so Gumpy, is this like the MLS Cup where the games don't count towards your standing? Because remember, Methy came over to America. They win 7-8 straight games. And still in last in the MLS, not going to make the playoffs. Well, why don't we count the games that millions of people watch into the whole thing? Is that what the FA Cup is? Like, we need to win these games for Burnley. It helps us to get out of that one particular area?
No, this doesn't affect the standings. This is the longest running cup in history of soccer.
So it doesn't mean anything.
This means nothing.
This is
JJ.
England. This is the FA Cup. This is part of who we are.
It means nothing.
Harry Redknapp.
If you want to win the treble,
Does it
you're
have
going to
any
win the
effect,
FA Cup.
Yeah, Dave. Can you get relegated or not, though? That's all that matters, right? If you get to bump up to the big guys, or you get
No, you win this, you get more money for the club as well.
Oh.
Yeah, the FA Cup is every single soccer team in the entire country. So, like, your local little team can work their way all the way up to play against the big dogs.
Ted Lasso, that could be embarrassing. If you remember. That could be tough.
Yeah, don't lose to them, JJ. Burnley,
we're playing Tottenham. We're playing Tottenham. It's
oh my God, you're going to lose by 80.
Spurs are a good squad.
They don't score 80 goals in soccer.
They're missing some players. They've been struggling a little bit.
The Spurs?
Hey, let's go.
Son is gone. He's on. I think he's on international duty, or he's back in Korea. So
military.
He's a phenomenal player.
AFCON and Asia Cup. They
want to put up the pink slips too with us with Concave Cup?
They go during the season, so players do lose like some of their best players during the actual season.
I thought part of that was a parody. Thankfully, there was someone speaking sense at the back. Stevie, if your agent, who earns millions because of what you do, says, we've had a call from Pat McAfee's show, we want you to go on and talk soccer to Pat. He could teach us a lot about snappers and kickers and punters and all sorts, but maybe needs a little bit of a brush up on certainly the FA Cup, doesn't he?
Well, remember that old saying, just stick to what you know. I think Pat should stick to what he knows.
I do remember you and John Barnes talking about the NFL and the Super Bowl back in the day, so I suppose.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I mean, if we sounded and looked, I wouldn't say the word I was going to use, the way they did, then I'm glad I never, ever did it ever again. Yeah, I mean, I don't suggest to anybody that you go on TV and talk about something you know nothing about and try and think you can get away with it because you just saw what happens.
Yeah. Rob, there's something about the FA Cup. I mean, as Stevie was speaking about earlier, it's a special tournament. Third round of the FA Cup especially, but when the draw is made, it's always a great day because the minnows find out who they're going to be playing. But when two Premier League sides get drawn, it's just like, Burnley going to Spurs. Postecoglou says it's just another game. Spurs haven't won the FA Cup since 1991. That Gaza tackle that forced him not only out of the game, but also to miss the Euros on Gary Charles and led to Stuart Pearce's free kick. Spurs won it 2-1, but they've not won the FA Cup since then. Is it just another game for Spurs?
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, when you're trying to explain the FA Cup, perhaps to an American audience like we've just seen, you need to really explain how prestigious it is. And it's all very well talking about the Premier League and how important it is and the finances that are involved and how important it is for the club financially to finish in the top four and get in the Champions League. The bottom line is that my opinion is that if Spurs were to finish 10th this season, but were to win the FA Cup, that would be a successful season. Yeah. That's how important the FA Cup is to every team and not just to Spurs. And I was actually surprised earlier in the season that Postecoglou rested so many players for a Carabao Cup tie against Fulham. Obviously, a competition they went out of very, very quickly because trophies change the way that seasons are viewed. For everyone, whether you're a tiny minnow or whether you're a massive Premier League side. And I don't think that Spurs will rest many players because I don't think they've got particularly many options with all the injuries. And obviously, Son has gone to the Asia Cup as well. But just on the face of it, I think to win the FA Cup for Spurs changes the way that season is viewed. It would be, you just mentioned there how long it's been since they won the FA Cup. It would be a huge, huge success for Spurs and Postecoglou in his first season.
Stevie, when we look at the Premier League clubs in action this weekend, and they're all there, it's the third round of the FA Cup, that's when the big boys come in. It's very difficult for us to preview games until we actually see the team sheet, isn't it? Because then you find out how seriously the managers are taking the competition.
Yeah, it's tough to get inside the heads of the managers. You're talking about the Spurs Burnley game, but obviously Liverpool, Arsenal as well. Both teams going for the Premier League title, both teams looking to do well in the Champions League, if not win it. And so it comes down to the rotation again, and where the FA Cup falls, only they know in their own head. And I guess it trickles down. We're talking about Burnley and Spurs. For Spurs, you would think, because they haven't won it since '91, you would think we want to go and win this. But I remember the conversation Postecoglou had last weekend talking about how tired all these players were.
Yeah.
So it is really difficult to figure out what they're going to do. I would suggest Burnley, however, play their first team, no question. They need a win. They need something to get them going. They need something to get the crowd lifted, or their own supporters back behind them. So I would suggest Burnley plays the first team. As far as Spurs, with their injuries, do they have any choice? Maybe they don't. So I would suggest Spurs probably as well would have as close to the first team as they possibly could. So this could be a proper game. I don't think this will be two reserve sides playing each other. I think you're probably going to see pretty much full strength teams, or certainly what they have available.
Set up very nicely by Stevie Nicol, and it's on ESPN Plus for viewers in the United States. The pre-game show begins at 2:30 Eastern and kickoff at 3 o'clock midday out west. Okay, Chelsea against Preston. Rob, I remember going back, Chelsea losing at home to Bradford and having some real funky results at home. Are they serious contenders when it comes to the FA Cup if they take it seriously?
Yeah, I would say so. I think any Premier League side, obviously aside from the top teams, any Premier League side that isn't in Europe, and by that I mean the likes of Chelsea and Man United now, there's no real excuse to be resting players. If you're in Europe, the FA Cup can become a little bit complicated the further into the competition you get. I think the fifth round tie always falls in a European week, and the managers have to decide whether you're going to take Europe more seriously than the FA Cup, and it does become a bit of a selection dilemma. Chelsea and Man United in particular don't have that problem, and I think that you've seen with the way that Pochettino has approached the Carabao Cup, how seriously he's going to take it. They're in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup against Middlesbrough. I think the first leg is next week. With the FA Cup ties falling on a Saturday, it takes precedent over the Premier League for those weekends. There's no real need for Pochettino to rest players. Obviously, it's been a bit of a sticky start to the season, but I think you are starting to see signs that maybe Chelsea are starting to find some kind of form. I think it's 1 defeat in 5. They've got Nkunku back. They're obviously having trouble scoring goals, but there are signs there that things are starting to happen there. I would expect, and I'm sure Pochettino would expect his team to be in the latter stages of the FA Cup this year, reaching the semi-finals and possibly the final.
Stevie, 2018 last time Chelsea won it. They beat Man United by 1-0. They play a Preston side 14th in the Championship. Is it one of these you expect Chelsea to win comfortably? Or again, is it, well, let's find out what lineup being put out by Pochettino first?
No, I expect them to win comfortably. I'm absolutely with Rob here. Chelsea are going to be playing as strong a team as they possibly can, and I think they're probably going to be a dangerous team in this competition because they ain't going to get into Europe, in my opinion. And so, as Rob said, the cup competitions become really important, and the fact that probably and usually by the end of quarterfinals, semi-finals, your Liverpools and Cities and all these teams, they start taking it a bit more serious, and of course they could potentially still be in Europe, probably will be, which means that Chelsea become dangerous because they, I think, will be more rested. And so, yeah, I absolutely think this is an opportunity for Chelsea, and I do not absolutely see any sort of slip up against Preston.
Okay, that's some Saturday action. Let's take a look and see where you can find it on ESPN Plus. 12:30 kickoff at the Bridge. Coverage begins half an hour before. Now, Rob is heading to Wigan against Manchester United on Monday. He was at Carrington on Thursday to get the thoughts of Erik ten Hag and also a little bit of a chat about Jim Ratcliffe and how the initial discussions have gone between the manager and the minority stakeholder. Let's find out what was said.
We had to have a long meeting. So many hours we sit together. I think we were on many issues. We were on the same page. Very positive. I think also from both sides. I can say that. It was a very constructive meeting. And yeah, we're looking forward to work with each other. We have to let it settle down. And they're just coming in, they're introducing themselves. They have good ideas. We have to see what we can integrate in togetherness. We will work, but after one day, you can't tell that. We are talking with Rafa Varane and with Anthony Martial, and we trigger the options. So we have triggered the options on Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Victor Lindelof, and Hannibal.
Right, and why are you talking to the other two rather than just...
I think that is an internal discussion between the club and the player.
Rob, what did you get from what Ten Hag was saying? It's very early, and I get that, and I'm asking you to kind of sum up. What do you think this is going to be? Is it going to be a match made in heaven, Ratcliffe, and also Erik ten Hag, or is it going to be something else? Right now, what are your first impressions about what he said about his meetings?
I mean, he certainly, when he was talking about it, sounded very positive. But I suppose he hasn't really got a choice. You know, essentially, he's got a new boss, and with anyone in that situation, in whatever walk of life you're in, your job is to impress that new boss because he's the guy that's going to hire or fire you. The problem that Ten Hag has got is that he sat down in those meetings in a position of weakness, in that after a relatively successful first season in charge, the start of this season has been, close to a disaster. And so it's always a bit nervous for a manager anyway when a new owner comes in, that the new owner's going to want his own man. And we saw that with Todd Bowley when he came in at Chelsea and sacked Thomas Tuchel after just a couple of weeks, even though Thomas Tuchel had won the Champions League for Chelsea in 2021. Obviously, Ten Hag hasn't been as successful as Tuchel and will be worried about his job. He sounded positive. He said that Jim Ratcliffe coming in as a minority stakeholder was positive. He said that they have good ideas and that he's looking forward to working with them. The problem is that this is a results-driven business, and that the only way he's going to stay in this job to see what ideas Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe have is if the results pick up and he can show that he's the right man for the job.
You've spoken before about Graham Potter and how he's liked by Ratcliffe and the Ineos camp. Is there any more in that? Is that something that will always lurk if there are negative results for Ten Hag and Man United?
Absolutely. And that's the situation we're in now, is that Ten Hag really is living result by result. And the last couple haven't been very good. And so every time there's a negative result, there's going to be talk about, maybe Jim Ratcliffe wants to bring his own man in. We know that he likes Graham Potter. They tried to speak to him when they were looking for a manager for Nice in France in the summer. Obviously, that never materialised, but he's obviously a fan of Graham Potter, and there have been informal conversations about what Graham Potter's plans are for the future. When does he see himself back in management? Where does he want to be? And so every time there's a poor result, these stories will resurface. And even more so when you've got an FA Cup tie against Wigan, because United should be winning this game 99 times out of 100. The problem is that they just haven't been consistent this year. And Gary Neville said it on Sky a couple of weeks ago, that you just can't trust them. You don't know what team is going to turn up from week to week. One day they're this thrilling comeback against Aston Villa to win 3-2, and then the next day they go to Nottingham Forest and lose limply 2-1. And while every Man United fan who's travelling to Wigan on Monday will expect them to win, there will be nagging fears in all of their heads that maybe this is just going to be another disastrous game. The problem is that Ten Hag, with a new owner to impress, can't afford that.
Stevie, 10.5 years ago, Ben Watson, in the first minute of added time, scored the winning goal for Wigan against Manchester City. No one gave them a hope that day, even the Wigan fans. What hope should they have? What chance do they have against Man United on Monday? Stevie, what do you reckon?
Do you know, I've got to go back to that interview with Ten Hag. I'm sorry, but I love how he comes out with all the, well, they've got some great ideas. I mean, what's he talking about? Great ideas? What, they're going to play 12 men instead of 11? Or, I mean, oh, let's win some games. Oh, let's play some attacking football. I mean, I would love to know what took them so long to talk about. You know, at the end of the day, I think from the minute that Jim Ratcliffe walks through the door, the results are going to be the deciding factor, whether he brings in Potter or anybody else. You know, that's just the bare bones of it. And they can all, and Ratcliffe and Ten Hag can talk about how well they get on, all the great ideas. They had a great discussion. You know, we're all on the same page. We're all pushing in the same direction. But if Ten Hag doesn't get results, then all of that is just a waste of. It's just blow. They're just blowing.
So how tricky a fixture is this on Monday then for Man United? No,
this shouldn't be a tricky fixture. Listen, Wigan, with all due respect, yes, they're at home. It's the FA Cup, but even a Man United side that might not be at their best should easily take care of Wigan. And again, I'd suggest if you lose 3-0 to Wigan in the FA Cup away from home, then maybe the change comes sooner rather than later. But as I said, I just said it. It's about points. It's about winning games. It's about the way they play. And if Ten Hag doesn't sort his players out and get them at least playing attacking football, you know, sometimes results go against you regardless of how well you play. But at the very least, he's got to play some good attacking football. But ultimately, it's about winning games. And if Ten Hag doesn't win games, then as I said, regardless of any conversation you have with whoever's in charge, you're at the door.
Before we get on to the big one at the weekend, Arsenal against Liverpool, Rob, I suppose you have to say out the three games that we've spoken about, Ange Postecoglou taking on Burnley in the FA Cup, Mauricio Pochettino taking on Preston, and Erik ten Hag taking on Wigan. The biggest upset will be if any of the teams wins, but if Man United lose to a League One side, all three will get through, won't they?
You would expect so, but then obviously that's what the FA Cup third round is all about. I don't think that Preston and Wigan aren't in great form in their leagues, and I don't think that they are really going to have enough to beat Man United and Chelsea. The one maybe that I would look at is the Burnley game at Spurs. You know, Burnley have had a poor start to the season, but are starting to find a little bit of form. We're well in the game against Villa when they lost 3-2. Postecoglou rested a lot of players for that cup game, that Carabao Cup game against Fulham, and lost. I do wonder whether he may look at it and rest a couple. You know, Burnley company's already said that he's going to treat it like any other Premier League game, that he puts a full strength team out. You know, maybe out of the three games, that's the most likely to be an upset.
Okay. Well, you will be at Wigan against Manchester United on Monday. And if you're in the United States, you can watch it on ESPN Plus. Again, a half-hour build-up to that one. And then it's Sean Maloney's Wigan taking on Erik ten Hag's Manchester United on Monday at 3:15 Eastern. Okay, so before we hear from Stevie and Rob talking and previewing Arsenal against Liverpool, Liverpool are going to be without Mohamed Salah and Endo. They're away to AFCON and the Asian Cup. So how well does Jurgen Klopp both think and want them to do when they're away with their countries? He was speaking earlier.
I said, if I wish you good luck, it would be a lie. Not what I do, obviously, but from a personal point of view, I would be overly happy if they go out after group stage, but it's probably not possible. So it's fine, and then they can go and win it as well. So, you know, good luck, see you, and come back healthy. That's pretty much the words, and that's it. And yeah, now we have to deal with it, and we'll deal with it. That's, of course, it's how you see the recent games, and then you think, okay, that looks a bit strange, but I'm pretty positive that we will find a way, but we have to show that obviously on the pitch.
Stevie, it's a tie of the round. It's Arsenal against Liverpool, but with no Mohamed Salah, is it still the three up top, or is it a change of shape perhaps for Jurgen Klopp to maybe keep Arsenal guessing ahead of this one?
No, not a chance. change of shape. I mean, listen, when Liverpool couldn't string a pass together and we're losing so many games, he never changed the system. So I don't see him changing it now. And I guess at the end of the day, you've got to think that, listen, as big a blow as it is losing Mohamed Salah, the fact is Liverpool, as far as front players are concerned, are in good shape. You know, you're still looking at Diaz, you're still looking at Nunes, Jota's back, and you got Gakpo. So you even though you've lost Salah, you've still got a choice. You've still got decisions to make. I mean, that's a great place to be in, and you've got to say that that's down to good planning. The fact that Liverpool can rotate when Salah's there, 5 guys who are all quality. Let's be honest. Listen, Mo Salah obviously stands alone as far as goal scoring and his importance to the team. But you know, there is absolute quality there. There's players there that can score goals. So yeah, I expect Liverpool to play with a front 3. The question is who sits out. My guess would be that Gakpo sits out. That's what I would do. And then I guess it depends on which way you want to go. Do you play Jota through the middle, or do you play him wide? So as I said, no Salah, but Klopp still has options and decisions to make, which is always a good place to be in.
Of those 4 players you mentioned, who's best suited to play the role on the right-hand side?
That's a tough one because I think Jota, Jota's a goal scorer, and it's. I don't think it's an easy decision, to be honest. Listen, they could all do a job. Let me just put it that way. They could all do a job. It just depends on Klopp's personal choice of who can do the job better. So I'm actually quite comfortable with any of them. Really, Jota can do it. Nunes can do it. If you switch Diaz over to the right hand side, he could do it and put Nunes or Jota on the left, or stick Jota through the middle. I mean, I really don't think there's an obvious candidate that you can turn around and say, well, absolutely Jota is the man to play on the right, because whether it's Jota, whether it's Nunes, whether it's Diaz, or whether it's Gakpo, I think you get the same performance. I think they're all capable of doing a job, and that really is what Klopp's looking for as far as the defensive side of the game. It's about getting somebody to do a job. So I'm not going to pick one of them to play in the right because I think they could all do it.
Rob, let's talk Arsenal. 2-0 defeat at home to West Ham. 2-1 defeat against Fulham. Does this now become a more important game? And it's important already against Liverpool because of those previous 2 results for Mikel Arteta.
Yeah, I mean, that really is the golden question with Arsenal. Arteta won it with Arsenal in 2020. But they haven't been past the 4th round since. And Arsenal went to City in the 4th round last year and they rested Ramsdale, Odegaard, Martinelli, White, Zinchenko, all left out, and Arsenal lost to City and went out. I imagine that Arteta, in a normal season with his team, hopeful of really challenging for the Premier League title, would probably do the same again. The problem is that you just referenced those results over Christmas. It's been a pretty disastrous Christmas period, really, in the Premier League. And you do wonder if you were to throw another defeat, an FA Cup defeat, on top of that, particularly at home, whether that would increase the pressure a little bit. I'm not suggesting that Arteta's going to get sacked if they lose to Liverpool, but it's another defeat that Arteta probably could do without. You imagine that if Christmas had gone really well and they'd taken maximum points from the Premier League games, that Arteta may feel a bit more comfortable in rotating a few and resting players, and talking to the fans and saying, we had to rest players because the idea is to go and win the Premier League title. But because it's not gone well over Christmas, I do wonder whether Arteta may second guess himself a little bit, and maybe the number of changes that he was planning to make against Liverpool, maybe we'll see a few more regular players start that game in the hope that they can knock Liverpool out and move on.
What's happened at Arsenal? Because it's not like one defeat and it's like, we saw that coming. You didn't. That's what happens. But back-to-back defeats, and for them to come out and say that the spirit wasn't there, it's the worst we've played. Is that a concern? And can they put it right against Liverpool with a good win and an excellent performance?
Well, that's the beauty of the FA Cup, that if they were to beat Liverpool and knock them out of the FA Cup, then immediately the mood lifts, and perhaps you're not talking as much about defeats to West Ham and defeats to Fulham. It's a big Premier League game in the FA Cup, and I'm sure that Arsenal really would have preferred a lower league team at home just to cruise through and move on. The only positive really of having Liverpool in the third round is if you were to go and win that game, Liverpool, who are also a side who have got ambitions about winning the Premier League title, that the mood lifts even more than if it had been a Preston or a Wigan. So yeah, I mean, it does become very important given what's gone before. I was surprised to hear some of the comments coming out of Arsenal after their little run. Teams challenging for titles go through these little sticky spells. You just have to get out of it as quickly as possible, and to beat Liverpool in the FA Cup on third round weekend is a great way of getting out of it quickly.
Stevie, the recent game at Anfield, the 1-1 draw, I thought was really entertaining, and it was probably a fair result. Is that where we are with these two teams right now? They're really close, and it's very hard to separate.
Yeah, as far as both first teams are concerned, yeah, it is tight. But I can't help thinking that Arteta is going to be sitting in his office, and he's going to have the little voice on this shoulder, and he's going to have a little voice on this shoulder, and it's going to be, do we stick with the plan or do we need to win a game? And I think it will be interesting which one he goes for, because he'll be sitting with his staff and they'll be sitting going, look, we planned that the third round of the FA Cup wasn't going to be as important because we obviously thought we were going to be challenging for the Premier League and we would win our group in the Champions League, and we sat down and we mapped out what we hoped the season would look like, and the third round of the FA Cup was not top of the list. That really is what the problem is this weekend for Arteta, because particularly being at home as well, that makes it even harder, because to lose at home again would be, as we know, football fans are a little fickle, and some of the vultures are kind of swirling over the top of the stadium already. I mean, incredibly. So yeah, I'll be interested to see which little voice wins the battle, and I'm going to suggest that he sticks to the plan, and it will not be his first team.
It's interesting that you've both brought up that Rob said that Mikel Arteta might second guess himself. Stevie says he's got Arteta on that shoulder and one on that shoulder. Is there an element of maybe trying to overcomplicate this? Is it not just a case? Stevie's just said he doesn't think he might play his full strength first side, Rob. This is actually not a bad game to focus on, to get the win and to get back on track. Just do what you would normally do for a Premier League game, because you've got one game in 2 weeks coming up with this kind of half winter break. So just do it. Just get on with it. Play the game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for clues about what Arteta might do, I mentioned that fourth round tie that they had at City last season, where he did rest a lot of players. The problem with last season was because of the World Cup, the entire campaign was condensed and there was fixtures flying around everywhere. There was games every 3 days for the best part of 10 months. You mentioned there about January for the most of the big Premier League sides. January is relatively clear in that they have got that winter break back. They're not going to play 6, 7, 8 games in January. They're only going to play 3 or 4. And so maybe Arteta looks at it and goes, well, this is a bit of a different situation than it was last season. We're not playing as many games in January. We can afford to play some of our starters. I think the problem he's got is that from everything that Jurgen Klopp said, it sounds like he's going to pick a full strength team. So if he's hoping that maybe Klopp rests a few and he can rest a few, and then maybe they can match teams in that way, I don't think that's going to happen. And Stevie's right. You're playing at home in front of your own fans. You're not going to get away with losing and losing heavily to Liverpool. I think that Arteta's going to have to pick a few more starters, and perhaps he really wants to, and give it a good go, because they really can't afford to lose another game.
Okay, let's get to an end and have FA Cup final predictions and who's going to win the tournament before the third round kicks off. Stevie Nicol, who are your FA Cup winners 2024? Say Liverpool.
Liverpool. I always do as I'm told. Liverpool.
There you go. Rob, who you got?
I can't look past City. Pep Guardiola picks strong teams in every cup competition. They go deep every single year. They get to the semi-finals and they get to finals. I can see them doing it again and winning it.
Okay, so City will be hard to beat. Yes, I'm going to go Villa if they can get past Middlesbrough. That's going to be a tough one for them. So you can watch Arsenal against Liverpool. That's on Sunday. Another one for you on ESPN+. Here's all the details. 11:30 kickoff at the Emirates. Pre-game coverage on ESPN FC. Half an hour before. Thank you for your company today on ESPN FC Live. We do this 3 times a week, on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. Stevie's got Liverpool lifting the trophy. He did it 3 times.
No, you told me to say Liverpool.
Stevie, can I get 20 quid, please? See? You don't always listen and you don't always do what you're told. Rob's got Man City.
I'll give you 20 Turkish dollars.
And I'll pick Villa. Right, we're all off to the gym now because that's our New Year's resolution. Enjoy the FA Cup weekend on ESPN+. Bye for now.